So as part of the introduction, I'd like to introduce our two speakers today who are joining us. Let's just give me 1 second here. So Julie Reed first is the Acting Community Education Supervisor for the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority. She'll be developing and delivering the Green Leaders Education Program for students in the UTRCA watershed this year, which includes coordinating a virtual summit in June. That, I guess, is coming up quite quickly here. Julie's passionate about empowering youth and inspiring them to become environmental leaders. Prior to this role, she's a community programs coordinator at the High Park Nature Centre in Toronto for 4 years and is a member of the Ontario College of Teachers and an occasional teacher for the Thames Valley District School Board. Our other presenter is Erin Mutch, who's been a learning coordinator for the TVDSB for the past 5 years. Her area focus is environmental-led science and experiential learning for K-12. As part of this role, Erin supports community partnerships, the board's 4 environmental education centers, delivers professional learning sessions, and supports their Eco Schools programs. Erin has an undergraduate degrees in natural science and outdoor recreation, a bachelor of education, as well as her master's in education. So again, welcome to both of you. I'm going to let you take it from there.
Thanks so much, Adam. So we are really excited to be partnering together today to share this presentation. We are fortunate to have a wonderful relationship here in Thames Valley between the school board and our conservation authorities. And so we just want to be able to show some, as we're speaking today, some replicable pieces that can be used with any group of learners. And as we go through these steps, I really encourage you to think about how you can take the strategies from this program and bring it to life with your learners. And you'll see that the program itself is inherently cross-curricular. There'll be lots of opportunity for you to tie pieces from this into what you're studying in your classroom at the time, whether that's literacy, art, geography, science, or math.
So I'd like to take a moment and acknowledge that both Erin and myself, we both live and work in the Upper Thames River watershed, which is represented in the beige on this map on your screen. The entire Thames River watershed is the beige and the blue together. And I also want to take a moment to acknowledge that we are committed to building respectful, reciprocal relationships with local Indigenous communities, which for us includes the Chippewas of the Thames First Nation, Oneida Nation of the Thames, and the Munsee Delaware Nation. We also wish to honor the Dish with One Spoon Covenant Wampum, an agreement that we all have a responsibility to protect and care for the land we live on.
Thanks, Julie. And so Julie's going to put a link in the chat to a word cloud poll. And we just want you to kind of think for a second about what hopes or ideas or goals or outcomes come to mind for you when you think of ways to engage students in environmental leadership and civic action in their local community. And so I can't see, so Julie's going to share the link, and then you'll be able to see the word cloud populate. Julie will do a quick kind of summary of that while I keep this on the screen share.
Yes, exactly. So I posted the link in the chat. So you can click on that link and it will take you to Slido. I'm not sure if anyone's used Slido before, but this year with virtual teaching, it's been a really great tool, especially for brainstorming with students. So all you have to do is click on that link and the question will pop up in a window on your screen. And then you can enter in as many times as you want. And it should generate a word cloud of everybody's answers on your screen. So we can see a visual representation of our ideas, our hopes, our goals. So we'll give you a moment to do that. I'm seeing some wonderful words being added to the word cloud so far: agency, lifelong learning, capacity, activism, critical consciousness, empowerment, passion, cohesion, community, empathy, collective action, reciprocal relationships, social justice, radical, engagement, reimagining. Ah, what amazing, amazing words. Leadership.
Thanks, Julie. So we're going to show you just a quick overview of the program from the student and teacher perspective before we describe it further.
Oh, it's excellent. It's incredible that they've created a program where kids can learn about like curriculum expectations related to water systems or their environment, but be able to do it like with a hands-on approach. And then locally too, sometimes the conversation of global climate environment can be too big to really wrap your hands around. So for the kids to be able to do this and interact with London issues and London water system processes, it's incredible.
The first step of using this net is finding a stream, like the one behind me, and getting your net and sticking it in and having it like that. Then kick, and eventually bring it up. And I caught nothing, but you might catch a fish over there. I've caught a crayfish and a rainbow darter and a few other species of fish.
Cool. We kind of looked at the fish and saw the invertebrates and seen what they were, and we examined the water and sent the temperatures and that.
Start staff got really excited when we heard about moving forward with the sponsorship with the green program, and not just because of the meaning behind it and how kids get to come out and do some exciting work with the stream, but because we're actually part of it as well, coming out and helping with the whole program.
We caught a lot of fish, and we had nets where we would look through the riffles, and we documented and charted temperatures of the water and saw all these cool little bugs.
Students are interacting with a creek to really get kind of a micro look at some of the water issues. And then what's neat about this program is that we go on another field trip and then see the water treatment process or wastewater and what happens with that.
And so throughout the process that we're going to walk through today, students are working in their community to build knowledge based on their interests from the outset, and they're building relationships with adults who care about their learning. And so that's a really important piece that I love, that students get to see other adults besides their teacher care about their learning and want to help them be agents of change. And so the program, we hope you'll be able to see some examples of student agency and their own interest in mastery of some content knowledge as well, but foremost that we're providing a student voice and a lot of choice. So these are some of their initial, from that video that was taken, some of the student questions and what they loved, and then their further questions from that day. And so this green program, it's an education program designed to foster youth leadership, civic action, and environmental stewardship. And we have tied this to the grade 7-8 curriculum and some grade 10 curriculum in our board. There's a long history of the program existing already in North America, where it was first started in Maine with 2 4th grade girls. They led an effort to ban polystyrene foam after discovering the problems that the litter was causing in their local river. And so Earth Force in the States developed a process around the idea of youth-driven inquiry and action. And so they engaged environmental education partners in the area to create and lead local programs in the United States, and then eventually moved to Canada. And so our Conservation Authority staff have been trained by Earth Force. And then we, with a small sponsorship in a local area of our board in Oxford County through GM, and then start.ca has further supported other classes in our program, and the school board has supported a number of classes to participate. And so we started 6 years ago, and we've grown from 4 classes in Oxford County to 17 classes now across the watershed. And so just this partnership that is really allowing the program to grow. And then students see that there are multiple partners interested in supporting their community action. And so before we dive further into the process, I just want to talk partly about why we love this program for our students. So one really beautiful piece is that it builds on these global competencies, or the transferable skills that our Ministry of Education is now how they are referring to them. And it's not, this program's not designed to teach students what to think, but rather how to think. And it's really driven by their interests. And so while we're applying this community action and problem solving process to environmental issues, the process could be used by any other sector that your students are interested in, including social justice issues, through the same kind of strategies. And so throughout the process, students are going to learn about creating inventories and asset mapping, criteria-based decision, the democratic process, some research skills, and how to evaluate news media, as well as how to reach out and interact with local stakeholders and decision makers. So these transferable skills are so valuable to be building in our grade 7-8 students, and the confidence that is built is pretty incredible to see. And so we're going to, through this process, provide authentic opportunities for students to be developing themselves as 21st century learners and grow these communication, critical thinking, and collaboration and criterial thinking skills. And this image here is from the Ontario Ministry of Education's Culturally Relevant and Responsive Pedagogy monograph. And so many educators in Ontario have been revisiting these principles lately. And it's really helps to focus acknowledging our students' multiple social identities and how they interact with the world. And so this process, the green process itself, is place-based, where students are going to be studying in their own community and providing they're being provided with the tools and the resources to really make a difference, like this characteristic number 3. It's inquiry-based, where students are getting to select their own topics to research further, and they're building their own knowledge, like characteristic number 4, this constructivist approach to learning. It's project-based, where students are going to come together, select their topic, figure out what kind of project they want to implement, how they'll implement, who are the human assets in their community that can support their learning, like number 6, this culturally responsive teaching practice. And then it also helps to inspire youth voice and show students that they have a voice in their community that can often be dominated by adults, and that youth can make a real difference in their community, and that we have high expectations of all of them, like number 2, this affirming view of our students. And so then it also, the process lends itself beautifully to studying the social cultural structures in their community, and gives students a way to look at that and see how they fit, as well as lets teachers have this really deep knowledge of their students in a way that when you're delivering curriculum, it's not the same as when students are involved in building how things move forward. And so we're sharing the process today, but a similar document that you may want to reference. It's rooted in the same transformative learning principles as Learning for a Sustainable Future is Connecting the Dots text, as a way to build informed, engaged citizens and build some systems thinking skills. And so in Ontario, the first overall expectation for every science unit of study is to link that topic to society and the environment. And so even just starting with the science curriculum and using these processes, there's some great links to be made. And so we're going to share some examples today of really some student interest and questions that are related to the curriculum, but that they are driving the learning. And so one of the launch opportunities is to gather photos, videos, quotes, and newspaper articles. And in this case, we used Autumn Peltier and to tie in the language and the arts curriculum as a launch, and provide students of an example of an agent of change who's their own age. And so some of the learning goals with sharing this as a launch were for students to consider the intent of the photographer when taking and publishing an image, to consider the perspective of another person in the context of an environmental issue, to be able to think about their thinking in terms of how they interpret media, which is a great skill for grade 7 and 8s as their brains are developing, and then to understand when they are interpreting information that it's important to consider all possible ways of knowing. And the big piece here for us was we wanted them to acknowledge that age is not a determinant of power necessarily. And so I'm going to turn it over to Julie, who will start walking us through the actual process.
Perfect. Thanks, Erin. So this is an overview of the Green Leaders community action and problem solving process. So this process was developed to guide students from identifying local environmental issues all the way through to implementing a sustainable solution to one of those issues. So you can see that step 1 is discover. So during that process, which I'll get into a little more detail in a moment, the biggest part of that is the community environmental inventory. Step 2 is decide, where the students democratically select an issue. Step 3 is discover. So that's when they do research into community policies and practices, as well as contact stakeholders. Step 4 is decide. So that is goal and strategy selection. So again, the democratic process plays a big part of that piece. Step 5 is action, so actually planning and following through with civic action. And step 6 is conclusion, where they have opportunities to assess their success and reflect on the process. So I'll now dive into a little more detail and how this has manifested this year during a pandemic. So normally in a typical year, we run this program from September to June in person. And so we have our staff visiting the classes in school. And actually step 1, we normally organize watershed bus tour. So field trips for the students to actually be able to get out into their community to do that community environmental inventory. So it normally, you could see from that video earlier that it normally includes an in-stream visit. They also have opportunities to learn about waste management. So this year, of course, we had to adapt it because of the pandemic, and we actually ran the entire Green Leaders program virtually starting in January. So in January, we were here in Ontario under stay-at-home orders at that time. However, we were able to still have the students engage in that community environmental inventory. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Erin, we have some really great introductory activities. And one of those is the environmental citizen activity. So students have a Green Leaders Journal this year, and they have opportunities to have a lot of personal reflection on themselves as a leader. And we start with asking them to draw themselves on a page and then to highlight the qualities and skills they currently have that makes them an environmental citizen, and what qualities and skills they would like to gain. So here's some goal setting, some personal reflection, and opportunities to deepen their own environmental leadership. And on the next slide, you can see that we actually developed a new introductory activity this year because we couldn't take them on a field trip, where we gave the teachers 10 photos, and we used these photos to generate discussion. So we asked the students to identify what they think the photos, what environmental issues they think the photo represents. So I'm going to take a moment to ask you to participate if you can, and take a look at this photograph. And in the chat, you can let us know what environmental issues you think this photo could represent. And as I did with the students, I asked them to think locally. So you can take a moment to look at the small details in the photo. But if anybody would like to type into the chat any environmental issues that they notice that they think this photo represents, you could do that now. Great, so I see from Jason, salt pollution into streams, chloride toxicity. So you might notice that small sign on the storm drain that says no dumping, drains to streams. So that was an opportunity to introduce students to the idea that there's no filtering system. When stormwater goes into that drain, it dumps directly into our local aquatic habitats and our natural waterways. So definitely an opportunity to talk about the things Jason mentioned. Yes, exactly. Education on where stormwater goes. Zoe asks, what is in the water? Excellent question. A lot of the Green Leaders process is asking guiding questions, that inquiry-based learning. Problems associated with maintained lawns, says Kelly, as opposed to naturalized spaces. Exactly. We talk a lot about impermeable versus permeable surfaces, as well as native plants as opposed to non-native plants, flooding and climate change, and urban runoff. Fantastic. Thanks everybody for participating. If Erin just clicks on it, yeah, exactly. Thank you. You can see some of the issues that students identified with me. So they said water pollution, stormwater runoff, car pollution. They noticed the car in the photograph, impermeable surfaces leading to flooding, and threats to aquatic animals and habitats. So we did this with 10 different issues. You can imagine how many, 10 different photos. So you can imagine how many issues the students generated from those photos. Moving on to step 2. And I should say that we also did still encourage the children to go for a neighborhood walk with a family member this year, and gave them a sheet to record their observations and take photos in their community safely during the pandemic. So moving on to step 2, where they start to decide an issue that they want to focus on as a class, we start by modeling, looking at the causes and effects of issues. So on the right, you can see this was something we did as a class, an example, where the environmental issue was litter in your neighborhood, and the students identified the causes of litter in your neighborhood and the effects of litter in their neighborhood. So we use Jamboards a lot during the virtual teaching to be able to generate these ideas. And then on the left, you can see the root cause activity. I asked students to individually fill that out for each of the issues that they had generated on their environmental inventory to make sure that they were all down to root cause for environmental issue. And I asked the students, do you think it's more effective to focus on changing the cause of an issue or the effect of an issue? And in all the classes, there was a consensus that if we change the root causes, we can actually have a lot more, that's more effective to a sustainable solution. So it was a really great opportunity. And like Erin was saying, skills like this are transferable to any subject and are skills that students can take forward with them in the future. So then we needed to decide on an issue. And so there is, the basis is democratic decision-making and empowering the youth and making sure everyone has a voice. So one way that we narrowed down our list of options was to use criterial thinking, and the students actually generated their own criteria. So this is an example from one of the classes, and they first did a vote to get their long list of environmental issues down to 5. And then we ran it through the criteria that they came up with. So you can see on this slide some of the criteria they came up with. And a few classes also came up with, is it pandemic safe this year? Of course, having to consider that, but also timeline, right? Is there an action we can take by the end of June, by the end of this school year? So you can see here the top 2 through the criteria were litter and destruction of animal habitats. And after that point, we did a vote. And I will demonstrate a bit later how we did another kind of democratic voting. But through this process, the students were able to choose one environmental issue to focus on. And then they moved on to step 3. And I'll pass it over to Erin to talk about step 3 of the Green Leaders process. Oh, sorry, you're just on mute, Erin.
Thank you. And I'm going to move the slide too. So Julie, did you want to talk about the policies and practices and people before I talk about stakeholders?
Oh, sure. So step 3 is all about research. And so we identify the policies and practices in the community. So the rules and guidelines, as well as the community practices, what people are actually doing about this issue in the local community. And then the students also generate stakeholders. So they make stakeholder webs, they identify anyone who's affected by this issue or has an interest in the issue or is impacted by this issue. And they actually reach out to them. So they are able to do some background research before emailing, setting up phone and video interviews, and actually getting in touch with local stakeholders to learn more about their issue.
And so for this example, the students created a long list of who all the stakeholders were involved in habitat loss. And then the next step in the process, which I really love and have used multiple times outside of this green process, is to do an empathy map. And so the students then have to consider from the perspective, take the perspective of one of the stakeholders and consider, if you were that person, what are you seeing related to this issue? What are you hearing related to this issue? How are you feeling and thinking about it? And what would you say and do? And so Julie's going to put a link to a Jamboard in the chat. And then if your last name is, so I'm going to see if I can share the screen of the Jamboard at the same time. So I hope this works. Is that working?
Yep.
Okay, great. And so the link so that you can participate is in the chat. And if your last name, because we didn't know who would be here today, if your last name is A to E, then you can take the role of a young child or student. If you're F to M as last name, then take the role of a parent, N to R for enforcement officer, and S to Z for government. And so our question that we came up with last weekend is in Ontario, parks and playgrounds were closed due to the pandemic. So if you're a young child or their parent, what would be your perspective? What are you going to start seeing and thinking and feeling about that? If you're an enforcement officer, So for students to then take on that role of someone kind of maybe very different to them is valuable. So how you use Jamboard, if you haven't used it before, I'm going to demonstrate on the student perspective. You click on the sticky note on the left here, and it will let you create one. You can make it any color you'd like. So then maybe a student might feel sad about the playgrounds being closed. And so you can put that into where they think and feel. And so we'll just give you a minute to try this out. So Jamboard is part of the Google Suite. So we use it with students in our online learning a lot right now because it allows for some collaboration. And so, so using the link, you can go into your specific slide of the Jamboard. You can advance them to the different ones at the top. And then make your sticky notes and put them in the right spot. And so thank you to those who are doing that already.
Erin, do you maybe want to repeat the last names again, just in case people need that reminder?
Yeah. So there's the slide. So depending on your last name, which stakeholder you would be, and then you just move to that slide.
Perfect, thanks.
So if you are a student or child in Ontario, your school had been taken away the week before, and then your playgrounds the following weekend, and you were being put into a fully online learning situation for likely the third time in the last 15 months. And so, and for the second time to have the parks removed. And so students in Ontario would be asking questions as to why, and they would see that the playgrounds were empty. So where I lived, the caution tape went up on Friday, and then actually, if you didn't follow what was happening in Ontario, the decision was reversed on by Saturday evening, and then the caution tape came back down again. So students, I think in Ontario saw that when large, that everyone can have a voice in some part of the democratic process. Even when decisions have been made, they can be reversed, which is pretty neat, I think, for kids to see right now. And so parents were frustrated in Ontario and wondering what on earth they were going to do with their children inside all day for 6 weeks was what it was looking like at that time. So thank you for adding your, and so the enforcement officers were seeing angry community members and not seeing children in public spaces, and they might not have felt that they wanted to enforce it. So it is neat for students to consider that perspective. I think that people are doing their job and maybe that's not the right person to be complaining to. And then the government is trying to still do the right thing, and they're trying to communicate, and they're trying to, but they're seeing and hearing people be upset. So I'm gonna go back to our slides. Thank you for participating in that activity. There we go. Julie, can you see the next slide now?
Great. Yes, thanks so much. So after students have actually contacted stakeholders, after doing that important empathy piece, students have the opportunity to really focus in on the policy or practice around their issue that they want to change. So they've identified all these policies and practices, and now they're democratically selecting one to focus on before coming up with a goal and a strategy. So an action project, and their own strategy of how to accomplish their goal. So I mentioned earlier that there was a few ways that we were doing the democratic decision making this year. And one of them was an app called Dot Storming. So I'd like to demonstrate that now. First of all, you can see on this page or on this slide that this is an example from one of the classes I worked with, who had already narrowed down their issue to the destruction of animal habitats. And then they We brainstormed the policies and practices they might want to change. And then we did a voting where they each got 3 votes. So they were able to distribute them as they wanted. So they could put all 3 votes on one policy or practice if they felt really strongly that their class should focus on that. We also did consensus building where the top few issues, they had opportunities to explain why they felt passionately about that. So we could listen to that. But this was kind of the final step, was this dot storming poll where they could spread their votes out. They could put, they have 3 votes, so they could put them on 3 different issues, or they could put them all on one issue, or in this case, policy or practice. And I wanted to give you an example. So let's do an example. I'm going to post it in the chat now. So if you click on the link in the chat, it will take you to a website called Dot Storming, and you will have 5 votes. And what I'd like you to do is take a look at these examples of strategies. So these are examples of action projects, and there's 5 main categories that I've divided them up into. So there's ask for change, environmental management, community organizing, creating or serving an organization, and engaging the media. And I've given you many different examples, but I wanted you to use your 5 votes to just select the 5 that resonate the most with you, or maybe that you think would be ones that youth you've worked with in your community might be interested in. But this is just an example of how I've been doing it virtually with the classes this year with students, where they have a chance to generate all these ideas, and then I put them in a dot storming voting board for them, and then they can vote, and they have those multiple votes that they can use, and that use differently. So in order to have your votes, you do have to enter in your first name. So you just click on the link, enter in your first name, and then the votes are represented by dots. That's why I said dots accidentally. So you have 5 dots, and you'll see, you just have to click on the empty circle by the one you want to vote for. And then your dot you'll see, it'll be represented by green on your screen, your 5 dots. So I'll give everyone a moment to do that now and vote for 5 that resonate with you. So, and then once you've used your 5 votes, and once everyone has, what you can do is in the top right of your screen, if you're still on the dot storming page, you'll see a blue button that says rank or rank by votes. And if you click on that, it will quickly just automatically rank them in the order of highest number of votes to the least amount of votes. So as you can see, this is a really easy tool, online tool to use live with the students, where you don't have to count up their votes, but it's easy to see. And when I press that blue rank button on my screen, I can see that some of the top ideas that resonated with everyone today were in environmental management. So creating a pollinator garden and building a plan for its maintenance, and installing rain barrels. And then the 3rd most popular was create an eco club focused on action. So I wanted to show you that tool. It's a tool I've used quite a bit this year, and students have responded really well. Obviously adapting for virtual teaching, but there are really great resources out there that you can use even when we're virtually teaching. So going back to our presentation now, after choosing their goal and their strategy, the next step for students is to take action. And there is, of course, a lot of organizing and planning. So defining a course of action includes reflecting on what they know, reviewing everything they've done so far, setting their goal, and deciding what to do next. So you can see on the right an example of an action planning sheet that students just recently filled out for the Green Leaders process. We did this together as a group virtually, but their environmental issue was littering in our community. And so the policy they wanted to focus on was, the practice they wanted to focus on is that they identified a lot of people littering on a basketball court next to their school. So they want the people, their goal is that they want people who are littering to stop, which will result in the basketball court staying clean. And their strategy that they've developed is, in order to achieve this, we will educate the community and help make it easier to prevent littering. And then you can see on the right in the green of that chart, the key parts of their strategy. And this is all generated by the students themselves. When I've been doing virtual teaching and inputting their ideas on their behalf that they share either through the chat or turning their video on or their microphones on, I try to keep it in their own words as well to really help empower their voices. So you can see that this class, 6 key parts of their strategy are to create a contest to help clean up the basketball courts, to get the City of London to put in recycling stations. The students identified that the main source of litter are disposable water bottles, plastic water bottles. So there's a garbage bin that was recently put into this area, but they want to ensure there's also recycling available. An awareness campaign, both online and outdoors, to organize a community cleanup. And right now they're considering how they can organize that during COVID. Picking up garbage there once a week, although the students did identify that that's focusing on the effect, and that's more of a Band-Aid solution, but they did still want to keep it on their list because they also thought that seeing a clean basketball court would help people maybe think twice about littering. They also had an idea to post photos of what it looks like at its worst when it's really full of litter. And then lastly, they want to encourage people to use reusable water bottles. So they're actually looking at where's the closest water fountain? How can we encourage people to bring their own reusable water bottles instead of bringing these disposable ones that they're throwing on the basketball courts? So lots of great ideas there. And the next step for this class will be to form 6 committees. So each of those 6 key parts of the strategy will have a committee, and the students will serve on those committees and make sure that step gets accomplished and really organize their ideas and identify which stakeholders they need to be involved with to complete all aspects of their strategy.
And part of the really great the outcomes of this is the students are getting to meet with many adults who work in the community, and we're able to get to these action projects because of some great relationships that we have. Julie mentioned with the City of London, so with the municipalities within our school board, as well as with Conservation Authority staff. And so some of the other projects that have happened to the students at the bottom right here are building a bioswale in their community. And then they're communicating to the community what that is, what its function is, how they were part of implementing it, who they worked with. So the last part is reflecting on the implementation and sharing with the public. And so the other 2 pictures here, students had been working with the Conservation Authority in terms of turning what was a wetland into a possible destination for outdoor recreation that would be palatable and interesting for students to visit, so teenagers. In this case, it was a grade 10 class. And so the Conservation Authority was gathering their input in a meaningful way. And then the students presented to the Trails Council and to the municipality in council chambers their ideas. And so the different groups had pitched their different ideas, and they had an authentic audience for their learning, which was really powerful to have. And to be in that setting was really special too, that they were presenting in the council chambers, not in a classroom. And so we're looking for ways in the end for students to not only have completed an authentic project that actually has made a difference in their community, but then to have an authentic audience for them to share their learning. And so that they know that there are a number of adults in the community who really care about their learning and their ability to affect change in the community. And so Julie's going to describe kind of, then they get to share what they've done with each other at the end, which is pretty neat.
Exactly. So we're hosting a virtual student summit for all of the Green Leaders classes that participated this year. So as Erin mentioned, that's 17 classes in our local watershed. And so on June 10th, we will plan an entire day of asynchronous activities with 2 opportunities for synchronous sessions. So all participating classes will be given this full schedule, which a big part of that is the students reflecting on their own process, but also, of course, sharing what they did with the other classes. So we're asking the students to create video presentations of their action project, what they learned, what they did, and then we're going to use Flipgrid as the platform to share that. So other classes will be able to go in and leave their own feedback and on the various classes and share that. And then we're also going to provide opportunities for each class to engage with virtually with a stakeholder. So that will be one of the synchronous sessions. So we'll group classes together and they'll have that opportunity to talk with a relevant stakeholder and for the stakeholder to share their ideas and their feedback on the students' projects. So the stakeholder will be provided with that video presentation and will be able to give that constructive feedback and really, we're hoping boost their self-confidence and give them that, take them seriously, right? Validate that they did a wonderful thing and to encourage them to keep pursuing environmental leadership. And then another component of our virtual student summit will be a local environmental leadership program that we have here in London. So they are high school students and they're actually going to prepare a presentation for the grade 7 and 8 students who participated in Green Leaders to provide guidance and support and suggestions for these grade 7 and 8 students to continue to pursue environmental leadership. Which is really fantastic. So it'll be students who are just a few years older than them, but who have been really involved in environmental leadership by being part of this ELP program. And we'll be able to give them those local suggestions of ways to stay involved. So that's another leadership opportunity, mentorship opportunity and connection. And hopefully even some of the green leaders in this program will apply to be part of that ELP program in the future. That would be fantastic.
And I'm sure, as you could have heard through Julie's explanations, there's been a number of adaptations made over the last year of how to still work through this in a virtual setting. And so I just want to publicly express a lot of gratitude for our Conservation Authority partners who've worked to find ways to still design really engaging opportunities for our students in some pretty challenging times. And so we just wanted to open up for any questions. I will see if I can open the chat also while still presenting.
Thank you so much, Erin.
Thanks both of you, Erin and Julie. This has been absolutely incredible and such an engaging, I didn't know about this voting system and stuff. So I'm learning all sorts of great tools just by seeing all your great examples. Does anyone in the room have any questions? Feel free to unmute if you'd like, or send them by the chat. We can moderate them and take a few. We have about 5 minutes, so.
We were hoping to be able to share some virtual engagement strategies with other educators that they may not have already. I mean, I think Jamboard's pretty popular, but there's the dot one is kind of a neat one that I hadn't used before. Julie showed it to me.
Yes, and Slido's fun too, those word polls. It's just nice to be able to brainstorm in a different way, like Erin said, when we're engaging virtually with students.
I think the session's recorded, Jason. So the whole beginning of us explaining even is there. And then Adam, when will the recordings be posted? I know some of the keynotes have been shared kind of immediately by email, but then I think the other sessions maybe in a week or two will be, is that right?
Yeah,
do you know?
That's right, exactly. And conference attendees will be informed when we got a bunch of them to put up, but once they're ready, for sure you'll have access to them.
Okay.
Any other questions?
So just going to put up our Twitter accounts because Julie and I both share a little bit about this as the year goes on as well. And there's some pictures on there. Yeah, so the process itself, that's a good question, Jason. The process itself looks the same, but it is scaffolded differently if it's a grade 6-7 class versus if it's a grade 10 class. They're able to run with things a little bit quicker in grade 10 and need less support on some pieces. But both, like I would say even grade 6-7 and grade 10 need support with reaching out to stakeholders through telephone or email, how to properly write an email, how to have a professional telephone conversation that's not only with your thumbs. Those are skills that even grade 10s can use some support with.
And for this year, I made that a Kahoot quiz. I figured that that kind of content about being professional and respectful while contacting stakeholders might, knowing how much students love Kahoot quizzes. I did that with them, and it was really funny because the next time I met virtually with one of the classes, they asked if they could do that Kahoot quiz again. So you never underestimate how engaging some of these virtual tools can be, even when the content isn't, it's important content, but they were so engaged that they wanted to do it again. But it was a good way to have the students really think about how to be respectful with stakeholders. And we even talked about respectfully disagreeing with stakeholders, right? So you might have a different opinion, but if you've done that empathy mapping beforehand, how can you be kind and how can you voice your opinion without, being disrespectful and holding space for their point of view, where the stakeholder might be coming from as well.
And so just in terms of the curriculum as well, we're looking at this through in Ontario, grade 8, one of the units of study for science is water, and grade 7, one is interactions in the environment. So those are kind of the two curriculum where we're kind of meeting curriculum expectations in science, but still pulling in geography expectations, language expectations, the arts in some cases. And then in the grade 10 group that we work with, they have a credit in civics and careers. And so we're tying some curriculum expectations in that way as part of their bundle. They also have an interdisciplinary credit, and this is very systems thinking and interdisciplinary in nature. So they're getting some of the curriculum expectations for that as well. Becca has a question.
Yeah, you talked a bit about like the democratic process, and we saw that happening with the dot storming. And I was just curious whether that democratic decision making is something that you're talking about specifically with students, or something that you're more integrating in the process of doing the work, or do you explore why democratic process is important for environmental work, sort of specifically?
I did address it specifically. It is part of the curriculum. Of course, today I couldn't go into all the details of everything, but it's very explicit. And we talk about a lot of this Green Leaders process is run through guiding questions. So Earth Force in their curriculum, they've provided educators with these guiding questions that you ask at the beginning of each of these steps. And so we did talk and have a big discussion on why the democratic process is so important. And again, that is those skills and that critical thinking about the decision-making process is so transferable to everything, to their future life, their life ahead of them. We did have a lot of discussions about it, and talked about how consensus-based decision-making was probably the best type of all, but how practically when you have, hundreds, if not millions of people together, how maybe that can't always happen. You can't hear every single person's voice, but that in the classroom, we were going to try our best to do that. And then sometimes it did come down to, that dot storming, but the idea of them having more than one vote, even, we talked about how that was a bit more maybe democratic.
So I hate to have to cut you off, but unfortunately, I'm just going to give you a little bit of time in between sessions. So again, thank you both so much for such an incredible presentation.